India Charts publishes Nifty Daily, daily video updates, the weekly Elliott Wave Outlook, and the Long Shot Report covering all asset classes.
Starting last evening, I have this very interesting Twitter discussion which is going on, and it's going on because it relates to the subject that I take on, which is the falling dollar, rising commodity prices, and the metals boom. Of course, there's been a pretty steep correction recently, but apparently even after this correction, people are still saying the same thing, that they won't move up, and they're doing that on different reasoning. And this was more a generalized discussion, I would say, because as you can see in this argument, it's based on, whatever news flows are there, whether it's around Evergrande or the recent rising bond yields. Now, what gets overlooked in this scenario is that rising bond yields, as I say, are part of what we coin as the risk on trade. So when I actually look at this chart, and we've discussed it and seen it before, we're essentially looking at an inverse correlation between US equities and US bond markets, right? So whenever you have equities going up, you have the bond market going down, which means yields actually rising. So here when you had a big equity sell-off, that's the Dow, you had bonds actually going up or yields going down. So the bonds and equity prices are inversely correlated, which simply means that yields are more directly correlated. So you actually have an environment of, so if I inverse this, you have an environment of rising bond yields along with rising equity prices. And that's something that doesn't easily sink in because that's not the general news narrative. So there's one more intermarket chart among many which I keep throwing up from time to time, just like I did for oil. And so if you look at it, this inverted chart of bonds, which is essentially the bond yield, you can see it was rising post-pandemic, of course slowly, not as fast as the market. But here there was a pretty sharp rise. Now, if there was such a sharp rise in bond yields, were markets falling or rising, that's really an important thing to close up and watch. You really need to zoom in, and then when you see this entire phase where yields are going up, you see that equities are also going up, and then when yields are going down, equities have been flat for a large part of this period. And I've been sensing as yields start rising here again that equities go up. Now, we haven't seen that initially, so we saw this dip, and when this happens, everybody relates this dip with rising bond yields, which is what I'm trying to argue against. It's not the case, because when money moves out of debt into equity, you'll usually find debt, which is bond prices, going down, which is yields rising, and equities actually going up because the money is moved from bonds to equity. So that's the risk parity trade in progress. Of course, there's a tipping point where, rising yields do become a problem, and that's usually at the end of the move. And, so by the end of the move, markets are overbought and they roll over, and then we blame the yields for it. Which is somewhat what happened in, say, 2018. Here also you had a very similar environment where equities were going up to this point, and so were bond yields, right? So if you look at this, the inverted chart of bonds, so bond prices are going down, which means yields are going up, equities are going up. They are flat over here, market sort of flattish here, it takes off, and so do yields. So if you look at this more closely, you see yields going up, up till this point. Now we call this the tipping point, where stocks start going down. But typically when stock starts going down, then money moves back into bonds, and bonds start going up, which means yields start going down as well. And so even though there's a short-term inverse relationship here, eventually both are flat to down because bonds and equities remain inversely correlated. So these phases repeat, so here markets are down and bond yields are also eventually flat. It's except for this short period of time where it will look like yields are rising and this is happening. So this is a repeat of the scenario. Yields started to rise here, equities still sold off once more, and then you have yields going up. So yields are going up, but eventually it's going to drive equities higher as well. So the next thing I end up doing then is looking at across the board at different US indices, because that then tells us whether whatever sell-off you see near term in equities, is it sector specific or is it widespread. And the first thing you notice is here's the US Bank Index. It surpassed its previous high to a 52-week high. At the same time, when you've been seeing this panic in tech stocks. Okay, so the Nasdaq, which went through a correction because the Nasdaq had actually been outperforming both the Dow and the S&P for pretty much a while, and so you might actually read into this as a normal routine correction. If I draw a trend line of the last two highs, we've probably come last two lows, and we've come very close to it. This is the Nasdaq 100. In this case, we've actually touched it exactly. So we've taken support right there on this trend line and bounced back. So have we resumed a rally? I would like to think so, because we've really not broken down, and therefore you don't really want to preempt this. This argument can completely go on. So if I look at this, the Russell, it's been in one long consolidation phase, which I've been calling the fourth wave. It's really not gone big down or up. It's just zigzagging both ways and not made lower lows or higher highs for quite a while. So you don't have, like I said, an across the board decline in these markets, and there's some degree of rotation. And then of course I monitor the metals market. Metal index did very well. Now it's gone through a sideways phase, didn't make a new low recently along with the Nasdaq. So there you have again an inter-market divergence, where a new low in one index is not confirmed by the other, and so it's not an across the board decline. So that's the basic point that I'm trying to make. So with that, we come to the Nifty, because that's what we really want to all know about. Every time there's been a fear psychosis, the Nifty does get some impact, but increasingly recently we've actually seen smaller dips, and that's partly because we went through our own correction and consolidation all through the end of April into the end of May down here. And then we started a very slow rally, and volumes of course declined because of all the measures that have taken place on the margin front. And so it looks like a very low volume rally going on, but essentially it's a rally that's breaking out after, a lot of accumulation has happened. And again, just like I discussed about rotation in the US, there has been extensive rotation in India. So a lot of stocks individually have gone through deep weekly degree corrections and are coming out of that. Sectors have done that, like the pharma sector, auto sector, which was, down because of the lockdown, has not performed throughout this phase. Stocks like Reliance Industries have not done well for an entire year and have started to move up. And so this rotation where, some sectors did well, like IT has done outstandingly, and the others which were not doing well or had gone through corrections in between, including mid caps, have started to break out and rally throughout this phase, one after the other. And so that rotation is ensured that the main indices really don't come down that much. Okay, so therefore when I break it up and I'm really looking at this last part of the rally, which starts from here, don't look at this date column down here. I've just used the date set to really draw a chart of the hourly on a 30-minute scale, that is 9:30, 10:30 types, which I don't get on my regular software. So I'm just pulling down the date time frame. Don't look at that. This is just the most recent rally from the bottom that we made in July. And so you had a strong August and September, and then you have this consolidation zigzagging from late September into early October, and which I've marked as a fourth wave. So every time it pulls off, we start wondering whether you go to the lower end of the range. So I did call this correction in the late part of September. We did decline, bottomed, rallied again, looked like the fifth wave started. So initially I marked this here, and then we started to decline again, and so we moved it here. In the last 2 days, actually sent out my midday video saying that maybe if this rise, we mark this rise as three waves and it's selling off, is it forming a triangle? Because we do get triangles in fourth waves, and there was a small risk that it comes back to the lower line. Did it? No, it gapped up yesterday, and all we got is a 61% retracement of this rise. Now what this all tells you, so while you can sometimes call these short-term moves, tops and bottoms, you do get a dip. But if the larger trend is up and you're not fickle enough to, cover yourself and not keep overnight positions against the larger trend. See, this is the important part. The larger trend is up, and if you're not on the right side, then a lot of the biggest moves happen gap up, and so in fact, there's been so many studies that, if you miss some of the best days in the market, then you actually missed a very important part of the market move. So in line with that thinking, somebody WhatsApped me this chart, which shows exactly what I'm talking about. And what I was really trying to say though is that the overnight gaps, they're talking about the best days. If you miss some of the best days in the market, your returns collapse. And my study has shown that if you miss out on the overnight moves, which is from the closing to the morning's opening, if you're not there, you don't have a position, then your returns can actually halve, in terms of any system that you're following. So 50% of the returns are actually happening in these overnight moves. And if you're a trend follower and you have a position with the trend and you don't stay with the overnight gaps, then you actually missed out on a significant portion of the move. Now, sometimes you do have to risk manage as a trader. So if you're not a positional trader holding on to those longs and you're say in the options market and you need to do that, one of the skill sets that's really required is your ability to enter and exit. So if I come back to this Nifty chart, if you did exit here and you didn't cover at the lows waiting for it to go lower, which is also sometimes I do, sometimes we get there, sometimes we don't, then the ability to buy back, once you sense that yes, it's not headed lower, the trend is still up, is I think the tougher one. And that's where it becomes a behavioral finance problem, because it's really psychological. A lot of people are not trained to sell something and then buy it back at a higher price. The fear of it going down always remains. And that means that if you don't do that, you actually miss out on the up move that follows, even though you risk managed, as though managing risk is a bad thing. So learning to manage your mind on that is important. And if you can't, then it's best not to do so and then go to the higher degree trend. So this is an hourly chart, which means that if your daily chart is strong, don't give up on your position just because you have some sense that there could be an hourly pullback. And if you did get an hourly pullback, then possibly, if you've risk managed, then close out your trade at the end of the day so that there's no overnight risk. I think that's the basic lesson I can give to everyone who's doing this. I do manage to do both of the things, sometimes hold, sometimes close out, and I have no problem in getting back in, though I'll tell you, emotionally it's as painful as everyone, but we've been trained to do that. But if you're not in that camp, then don't do it. Then stick to a higher time frame view and then just maintain what you're really looking at. So if we looked at the daily chart on this very same index move, then what you end up getting, is a setup where if we really zoom into where we are right now, is that momentum indicators have been diverging for a while because the market was attempting to go up but not able to. And if we really zoom in, what it's done at least the last few days is attempting to hold on to the 20-day moving average. It almost broke it here, closed below it marginally with a doji. But again, yesterday's sell-off didn't go below that. So we can actually use that as our immediate support or trail, which is somewhere around the 17,621 mark. And what I'm waiting for is a clear sign as to whether we are breaking that and headed lower or we are holding that and headed higher. Now, in terms of the wave count, going back to the hourly chart, what I discussed here is that we could be in the midst of a fourth wave, which means one final wave up in a fifth is pending. And so far we haven't broken this channel that I drew from wave 2 to the low here, thinking that was wave 4. And if that is still true, and we haven't broken that, so we can actually take this channel support also, which is around 17,632, just above the 20 DMA. And the top end of the channel really stretches towards 18,400. So this is what we are starting to think about. If you've heard me in my interviews talking of 18,200 or higher, we're essentially looking at this map of the 5-wave advance playing out from the bottom that we made in the month of July. But all that is technical, and the debate on Twitter goes on. What if interest rates go up around the world? More importantly, what if the RBI raises interest rates, which is what we're going to be facing today? The RBI is going to be talking. A lot of people have started to judge whether they should or they shouldn't raise rates, or they will or they won't, or maybe they'll indicate something they're going to do in the future, just like the Fed has started to talk about unwinding its balance sheet. Now, India has really not expanded its balance sheet to a point where it has to talk of unwinding. We've done some bond purchases in the last few quarters, which were probably mandatory at that point of time. The real question is, as the unlock ends, because we've probably had bigger lockdown than the US with the second wave, then are we really ready, to start unwinding in terms of raising rates and so on? The other thing which I actually replied to this as the debate really continued into the morning, and I said, you just want higher interest rates is not what you're going to get. It's going to be a function of what the governments really want to do, because we've really not seen this kind of intervention by both central banks and the governments around the world trying to keep things going. So, central banks have been around trying to do that in the last decade, at least in the US. India went through its own mini debt crisis. Now governments have stepped in, and for the first time the RBI started buying bonds. So you have to see intent versus what is going on. And also, if you talk about inflation, you have to also identify whether this inflation is monetary. Now, economists and the long debates are that, all inflation is monetary phenomena. So that's something that has been debated over and over again. I don't think there's any final explanation to it, because there's always two sides of the coin. And this time around, actually, when you listen to a lot of the inflation narrative, it's actually around supply side bottlenecks. I mean, I don't know if you're really somebody who's shopping around, as I've been trying to do recently. If you go for anything from a car to furniture, which are of course high value items, or even some of the smaller things, like I'm trying to get my laptop repaired, it's taking months to happen. You walk in and you find some of the stores are actually empty, and they start showing you online booklets. Now you expect to walk into a furniture store and actually see something in front of you that you like, but instead they say that nothing's available. But if you want to book something, here's the online document. So you don't really get to order what you see, because bookings are like 4 months running. And that's now whether you call that pent up demand, or we shall simply call that supply side bottleneck. And it's leading to higher pricing. So because a lot of business has been lost during the pandemic, people are raising prices on everything to cover up for it. And that is being read into as inflation. Now, of course, if people accept the higher pricing, the inflation may become sticky, and it may be one time an advance in prices. Now, that doesn't mean that prices go down, but they probably can stop rising at a higher plateau. A lot depends on how much demand explosion happens because of the monetary action, and that's something I think it's too early to judge. So anybody making a judgment on this is doing so without looking at the situation. Even the RBI, I think, would be in a fix, and so would the Fed, which is why, while they tried to open their mouth on inflation, maybe under political pressure, logically I think what they kept saying, which is it's transitory, was simply based on the idea that a lot of this inflation is actually coming in because of the environment, which is the bottlenecks that have ended up being created from all the lockdowns around the world affecting the supply chains. Now, how much time will it take for all of that to unlock? Could take a while. I think everybody is working towards it. And it's only after that unlocks that you actually get the real impact of demand, supply, and the monetary phenomena to really judge whether we are at a point where you need to attack inflation, with interest rates. So we can use that as a tool. It's very similar to, you go back to 2008, you were already in the bear market for 9 months as far as the US is concerned, and in India. But you had a late oil rally, right, into July of 2008. Inside that housing bubble bear market, oil prices rose to $138, and that caused some inflation spike in India. And so the finance minister ended up going ahead and calling RBI to raise interest rates. And when you think about it, in the midst of a bear market, which was almost deflationary for the whole world, which we now remember as the Great Depression, or rather as the Great Recession, you are raising interest rates. How does that really make sense? So it made no sense, but they still did it because it's sometimes a political decision more than a financial decision. So if that's the only reason, I don't know if India faces that pressure or not. We'll come to know from the RBI's commentary today. But I would think that when we have been through 2 lockdowns, it's a little too early to start talking about rate hikes. Even though bond yields may be indicating some upward move, which is nothing but moving in tandem with what US yields are doing, which I've already explained, are more a reflection of the risk on trade. It's really not a long-term change in the trajectory of rates. Now, if the 10-year is at a certain point, does that mean that the Fed funds rate is also at that point? No, it's not at 2% or 1.5%. So bond yields in the market will always trade with a time element on it, and the demand supply element to it. But that doesn't really always now end up reflecting on what the central banks end up doing. So while they can, historically they used to, but recently we've been seeing that they're following a very, very different roadmap. So you have to really pay attention to what they're trying to do in a scenario where you have very, very high debt levels. So even as I record, this argument has gone on talking about stagflation, which is a scenario we have slower growth and higher inflation. I'm not sure, based on all the research that I'm reading, we are actually seeing higher growth with inflation, which is exactly the reply I'm going to make over here. And there it is. I've replied that we're actually getting this combination of growth plus inflation as the unlock trade is just unwinding. I mean, it's possible after the unlock, later on things peter out and you actually face stagflation. Yes, then we should deal with it. Maybe with higher rates, which would be a very different scenario, but I think it's too early to make that call. So anybody making that judgment right away could be on the wrong foot, and that is why, like I said, if you have, if you have embedded inflation, okay, and that can actually mean that nominal GDP goes up, which means revenues rise and profitability also rises, which we've already seen happen in the metal sector. Imagine that happens across the board and across sectors, and that I think is not really priced in. I mean, just imagine hotels permanently raise rates. Okay, how about that? And everybody still wants to go on a holiday because there's pent up demand. So suddenly the hotel sector will charge higher rates and people still go on a holiday. And what happens? Much higher revenues and profits. So that I think is what we're not thinking. And eventually it will also lead to wage pressures, because everybody will say, well, business is happening. Why don't you raise our salaries? And then wages will also move up to a higher plateau. So what we are looking at is a permanently higher level of prices. We call it inflation or whatever. And then from that plateau, what really happens is going to be the real issue as far as inflation or stagflation is concerned. So the markets always price in inflation positively, especially if it's a repricing of the type I'm talking about, where, you get both demand and prices moving in one direction. At that point of time, equities actually will outperform inflation, which is what we've been seeing over the last 1 year. So the problem really is not with the data point of inflation and growth and how these numbers are figuring out and the government intervention that is trying to help it, which is keeping equities elevated. The real problem we've faced is with sentiment. So, while all of this is happening, sentiment remains below par. There's been some improvement. If you look at equity flows over the last 2 years, it was negative, then it turned a little positive. We had this jump up in, July. But then all of a sudden drop in August. I really want to see what September looks like. And if you see the numbers drop off, then actually you're not seeing meaningful equity market flows from domestic investors, even though you have them participating in direct equity in such a big way that, a lot of the cash volume is being generated by retail investors. Another place where sentiment doesn't show up as strongly positive is FII flows. So these are FII flows in crores month-wise. And if we look at it just for the current financial year, March was a bit positive, but look at this: April, May, June, July, August, all negative months. And then September, you have some marginal flows. This is not exactly funny. If you ask me, if I move higher and I look at just the first 5 days of October, it's positive, then negative. So month to date, still negative. And so this, again, it's really surprising. I don't remember another time period where the Nifty doubled and FIs were actually removing money from the market. Still, to date, missing out on such a big advance. It somewhere doesn't show that sentiment extreme which you see at market tops, which should be extreme bullish or at least somewhat bullish or negatively diverging from an extreme bullish scenario. You have not even reached the extreme bullish scenario, and that's where sentiment really doesn't add up with the idea that markets are peaking. But are they really getting expensive? Well, if you bring in the inflation argument that I already talked about, if you have a repricing of, the economy, then probably the market's trying to price that in as well. And so in that sense, it might start looking a little less overvalued, which is exactly why I published this chart a while back showing what has been happening in terms of earnings. So first time the PE ratio started to drop in March and April, it was associated with the exchanges moving from reporting earnings on a standalone to a consolidated basis, which actually makes sense, as I mentioned in this article, because a lot of companies have been doing, earnings through subsidiaries and different, routes. Like Reliance itself has its communications business in a separate company, and, the Tata, since they acquired the steel and auto companies in Europe, have been reporting it separately. And so consolidated numbers have become the norm. And so this change is actually a welcome change, because if you look at most analyst reports, that is how they've been reporting it for more than a decade. Then why not the exchange? Why was the exchange still reporting historical PE? So this sort of corrects that issue, but you have to look beyond April. So you go beyond April and May, you find the PE ratio is still falling. And the reason it's doing that, it has been the earnings catch up that has been happening on a sector by sector basis. So that is now showing that the PE is still dropped. It's dropped below that extreme of above 30, where we would say it's in bubble territory, to somewhere around 25. And now from here, if it goes back there, yes, then we can say it's back in that territory. But in the meantime, you really need to watch the trade-off between earnings and the market's own growth. So if Nifty is rising at a certain pace, are we really growing earnings at the same pace? Is something to watch out for on a quarter-on-quarter basis, especially after the unlock has happened, so you can't judge based on what happened in the last quarter because part of it was under a lockdown. But I think the December quarter is where it's going to really get really interesting. And of course, we are entering earnings season right now, so a lot of the earnings could be disturbing, but it's possible the market simply discounts it and starts looking forward towards what happens in December based on current market data. But all that said, we did see some easing in inflation when it came to August data. Again, like I said, we are now in October, so you'll get September data. Some of it will be released in the in the coming days. Some of it is already, like the auto sales are already flying out. But here are some exciting data points. This one is of course from Hedgeye, which I speak of often, and this is the leisurely and hospitality job openings. Since I was speaking of hotels earlier, relating to the domestic sector, see what's happening here. So this demand for jobs is essentially reflecting what has happened after the reopening post the second wave. And everybody's opening up, trying to start up, and now suddenly there aren't enough people available for the jobs. Just as a reminder, for those who don't remember, 2010 inflation was double digits. Food inflation was 17%. The RBI meet was forthcoming. They raised interest rates only by 25 basis points, far less than what it would be required to deal with that kind of inflation, because they wanted to support the economy. And the stock market, or the Nifty, rallied another 1,000 points from there. So you have to remember that it's not really about RBI commentary, but what they're really doing, what their intent is. If you're going to keep real interest rates negative, it can get taken positively by the market. So what they may say about inflation and part of the political statement out of it, and what they're really going to do with the rates right now and going forward, and how they're going to monitor it, will sort of give a clue to the market as to how things are going to be. And if there's no real immediate risk, then the markets will simply lap it up and wait for the next meeting. So that's how it ends up being. And so when I look at the market in that context, and the idea that you've already seen an oversold condition in most of the US and Asian markets, which should now start bouncing back. India, which has not fallen that much, will simply get support from global markets loosening up again. And then it's really a question of how we trend from here. And as I'm saying, if we hold the 17,600 mark, we are starting wave 5 of the rally from the bottom in July, which has the potential to go above, well above the 18,000 mark. And that's what I think we're going to be watching out for in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.